I was actually 10 the first time he took me to a tugboat, and just kind of watched and saw what happened as people got me drunk, as the men got me drunk, and it kind of exploded. When I was 11 or 12, he started taking me to the local bars in town where my mother worked, getting me intoxicated, offering me out to the men that were there for the price of a couple of beers, telling me how to walk up to play the jukebox, how to dance, how to be provocative so that these men would want to be with me. It's 1 o'clock in the morning and there's 10 or 15 grown men from the coal mine coming out on a regular basis on almost every weekend to play with this child.
It hit a point where he was like, all right, now you're gonna have to make your own money because I can't afford to keep paying all this. So if you want to keep using drugs and stuff, you want to keep and stay with me, I need you to go sleep with this guy. I'm not gonna say his name, but this other guy. And that's how I figured out he was a gang member. At first it was just like, you would go and do it and you'd come back and he'd praise you and everything was great and we'd go and party the rest of the night and it was fine. And then a little bit later, it got a little bit more physical. Well, you didn't bring me back enough money. What are you doing out there? You know, you don't deserve this drug. Or here, take too much drugs to where I'm physically dependent, and then he would just not give it to me, so he could watch me go into withdrawal.
Sex trafficking, the actual definition, basically in child sex trafficking, is basically the recruitment, the enticement, the providing, the obtaining, the transportation of a child for a commercial sex act. And so that is the actual definition of trafficking. And I think it's very important to realize that when a child is sold in this way, it's not prostitution, and that's very important to communicate to people. When a child under 18 years of age is being sold for sex or is trading sex for money, it's not prostitution. She is actually being sexually assaulted. A child cannot consent to sex. And the other point I always want to make in sex trafficking is sometimes these young girls, and it's boys too, when they are having sex, sometimes it's not just for money. They're actually sometimes trading sex for food or a place to stay, or sometimes it's even drugs.
Often the confusion comes in when, well, it's her mom, it's her aunt that's in with her. It's not this stereotypical pimp that we have in our heads. Well, 40%, at least what the statistics I've seen, 40% of traffickers are female. And even if they're not the direct trafficker, they could be the madam or what they refer to as the bottom bitch. And so it could be the woman that's in there with her is controlling the situation.
Sometimes they'll say this is an aunt or an uncle or a friend. And anyone who's done pediatrics knows that when you come with a mother or an aunt or an uncle, there's an affectionate bond usually between that person who's bringing you. That person cares about that child's health. And when that parent comes or that person comes with you, they know about the child's health and they know who the doctor is or the medication. There's a warmth in that dynamic relationship. When this person escorts the child, that warm, dynamic relationship is completely absent. What you'll notice immediately is one of control. That person comes in and takes over the visit. And the child, the patient, is subservient, quiet, evasive, does not make eye contact with the escort, and in fact does not make eye contact with the physician. And the person who actually gives the history is the escort. And when you try to engage the child, they don't engage. When you ask them questions, they don't answer, or the answers to the questions are evasive. And that is the whole relationship, and that is completely abnormal. And that's one of your biggest clues, and that starts from the minute you go in the room. So that is a big tip-off to the healthcare provider. Watch the dynamic relationship between the patient and the escort. I would suggest for the medical provider to continue with the history and physical. Do not interrupt your relationship, because you want to establish in a relationship with that patient. You want to direct your care to that patient. You want to establish with that patient that you are the physician for that patient. You are there for that patient. You want to bond for that patient. If you immediately, run out of the room, thinking, oh, okay, this is a trafficking victim. If you immediately try to set up a bad dynamic, you will get nowhere. So what we do at Glennon is, and our protocol is, we complete the history and physical. If we are concerned, we still go ahead, complete the history and physical, and focus on the health care of the child, the victim. Then we want to conduct an interview. Now, the interview is very important, but it has to be done safely, because our concern is that if you do the interview in such a way, number one, you may not get a disclosure, and number two, you could be putting that victim at risk. Because again, traffickers have control of the victim, and traffickers can be brutal. So what we have to do is interview the victim in a safe and also in a gentle, respectful manner. So what we do is we have to separate the victim from the trafficker. And so we do this in sort of in little ingenious ways. So we usually say to the victim, oh, we need a urine test, or we need an x-ray. And so we remove the victim from the trafficker, and then we have our social worker interview the victim separate from the trafficker. So in a bathroom or in an x-ray suite. And the reason we do it that way is we always have our social workers do the interviewing, because they are specifically trained on how to interview these victims. And they're trained specifically as social workers, but also they've taken specific training in taking an interview on a trafficking victim. They actually follow a script that was developed by the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department to elicit the information in a very gentle, respectful manner. They start out very broad, because you don't go up to a victim and say, oh, are you being trafficked? Because I guarantee you will not get an answer that will make the victim run. So you start more general, sort of, what's your name? My name is Susan. I'm a social worker. I just have to ask you a few questions. And it's very general, sort of, where do you live? Who do you live with? And then you tend to ask a little more probing questions. But again, always being cognizant of their response. If you see they're getting upset, you back away and then go forward again. And then you sort of then move closer and closer to the issue that you need to get to. But again, doing very slowly, very respectful, because you know that these are traumatized. Remember, this is always a victim. This is not a criminal. Remember, these are not prostitutes. These are sexual assault victims. So that when you ask the questions, you always have that in mind. So you slowly elicit information.
Listen to what is the language that they're using. So are they talking about being in the life? Well, that refers to prostitution or trafficking. And so if they're calling it the life, ask them, well, how long have you been in the life? That shows them that you're listening and that you're not judging. You know what you're talking about, right? You're not, oh, how long have you been a prostitute? Like, no. Listen to what the language is that they're using, and then meet that as much as you can. But also don't act like you know what you don't know. They're going to pick up on that. They're going to know if you're faking it. That is one of their strengths, is knowing people and knowing how to read people. That's how they've survived so long. And so be honest, be yourself. Don't try to pretend like you've got it together. But meet them where they're at. And I even just get down to their level physically. If you're standing over them, what does that say to them? That says that I'm in control, I'm in power over you. Sit down, even if you can get even below them, so that they feel like they have more power, more control. Allow them to choose where they want to be in the room. And so again, if I'm forcing them, that is the only seat that you can sit in, that's the only availability, that's going to make them feel closed in. That might not feel safe for them. And so I'm going to let them choose, where would you like to sit? Where would you be comfortable sitting? keep giving them choices. They aren't given choices on a regular basis, and so ask them. Don't just tell them. They are the experts in their lives, and so learn from them. Take an attitude of humility and ask questions instead of making assumptions. And if you don't know, tell them you don't know. Don't lie to them.
Dr. Elaine Albert out of General Mass, Boston Mass Hospital, came out to do a training. And the training included that every medical professional had a policy of asking every patient, are you safe? Is there somebody in your home hurting you? Now, those two simple questions may not get you much, but what about asking about their history? Have you ever had any broken bones? Have you engaged in any sexual activity yet? Are you having any lower pain? Is there headaches? Is there stomach aches? Do you find that you tense up a lot and stress out a lot about some of the littlest things? Those are just a few.
Most of the time, since they are quote unquote sex workers, a lot of times it's the medical complaint that concerns us, because often they're going to come in with a complaint that's related to sexual activity. So a lot of times they'll come in with sexually transmitted diseases, or they'll come in with a sexual injury. So they'll say, I was sexually assaulted, or I have this lump down there. So a lot of the complaints will be related to a sexual nature. And yet when you go to examine them, it's more concerning than that. It's not, you don't necessarily see a mild infection, you see a full-blown infection. It's not just they have a little vaginal discharge, but they look like they have overwhelming infection. So in other words, sort of the complaint and the exam is much more concerning than what they're complaining about. There's sort of a disconnect. Or they might come in for an injury. The girl may say, oh, I fell, I think I hurt my leg. And then when you look at them, they look like they've been physically assaulted. So again, disconnect between the history and the exam. Or the patient comes in for a medical complaint and she's having an asthma attack, and when you start to get the history, you can see that she hasn't had medical care in a long time. So on physical exam, she looks a little malnourished, or her asthma is really out of control, and yet when you try to figure out who's her doctor, what's her medication, you clearly see she's not had medical care in a long time, and she's not in good health. So again, there's this disconnect between her health care. There's a paucity of information. You get the sense that she's not forthcoming in the information. The tattoos often are not the pretty tattoos that you see with the little rosettes or the butterflies. These are tattoos like barcodes or gang signs, or the crown, which is indicative of a pimp or a trafficker, or the dollar signs. And these tattoos are located on their genitalia, or on their inner thighs, or on their necks or their breasts, places where young girls do not tattoo themselves. Or the girls just don't look like they're healthy. They look malnourished, or they've been beaten, or they have signs of self-inflicted injuries like cutting. One of the things you have to realize is that most of the time they will not disclose, but you are trying to set the table that you are there for them. You are recognizing they're a victim. You are there for them. And even if they don't disclose, you end the interview with, I am here for you. If you ever need help, please come back. I am always here. You offer them resources. You end the conversation with, thank you for letting me speak to you. I am always here. We are always here 24/7. If you ever need help, please feel free to come back.
I want them to know we are here. And so when or if you're ready someday, this is where you can come. So I want them to have my phone number. So I would say the same for law enforcement, and because they need to know that there might be one police officer that they felt safe with and others who they didn't. Well, okay, then let's make sure, hey, these are my hours. This is my contact information. If you ever need anything, let me know, or a certain doctor or a nurse that they connected with. If they feel better with the nurse in the room, get the nurse in the room and get the doctor out. Do whatever you can to help them feel safe. And then always kind of have an open door policy as much as you can within your respect.
So for the victim that is sitting watching this video, I can say that I've been in your shoes. I haven't walked your life, but I've been in your shoes. And there's one thing that every human being has in common, and that's the feeling of pain. Pain shared is pain lessened. So I just want you to know that you don't have to live with that anymore. And every time that you share any part of your story, that pain becomes a little less of baggage that you have to carry with you. And there is help out there. Even in the smallest places, there is help around, and every minute counts. So even if you can only say, I have a traumatic history, or I had trauma, or I'm not safe, the smallest thing counts. So take your moment and choose to live today.